to Shoe Leather Faith. My name is Robert McMillan, and Nicholas and I are here, and noticing our hats, we're ready to get going. We hold to a pre-tribulational rapture, so we're ready to go at any minute, and I hope that you are too. So let's start our discussion of the end times. We're going to continue our two-part series on living at the end of the world that we started last week. Last week we dealt with three guiding principles that are going to impact us and we're going to see come to play in our daily lives as we get closer to the rapture of the church. The first is going to be a woman in childbirth. It starts off like putsy-putsy. Nobody's getting serious about having a baby, but all of a sudden the contractions get hard. They get closer together and they get regular, and you're racing to the hospital before that baby's born in your car. So that's the woman in childbirth. And that's the way these events are going to play out in the last days. They're going to start slowly and build. The second is the pre-echoes of prophecy. Things occur ahead of time. For instance, we need to have Israel in the land, and we need a temple in the land, in Jerusalem, at the time of the start of the tribulation, on day one of the tribulation. That's only going to happen if there are pre-echoes, and we should be looking for those pre-echoes. When it says in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 10, that the elements, the atoms, will be burnt up with fervent heat, we know from our understanding in these days that that could only happen through a nuclear device. Well, we got them plenty now. We can't stop it. It's out of control. That genie got out of the bottle and it ain't going back. But in the days of Peter's writings, they weren't certain what that meant, other than the fact that they believed everything was made out of tiny little particles that they couldn't see. They were so small. But those are pre-echoes. We know that to have 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 10 come into play, we need to have nuclear weapons that can destroy atoms, that can burn them up with intense heat. We also have to see that Jerusalem and Israel, the nation, are going to be key players in the global tensions of these last days. Now, Jerusalem on its own is not a very impressive city, except for the fact that God says, I'm going to have everybody worship me here. And that makes it infinitely important. And then the nation of Israel. It wouldn't be it's a tiny little country. It wouldn't be important except for the fact that God's chosen people he hasn't abandoned ever, they're living in that land. A land that God promised them, and he's going to fulfill his promises to them. So the focus will be on Jerusalem and Israel. And isn't that the way it is now? So let's look at the environment of the last days. Let's look at 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1 and following. But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud. Stop me if you're not seeing this all around you. Blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Aren't we seeing that? And isn't it growing in intensity, just like Paul said and Peter said? It's like a woman in childbirth. And even Jesus said the same thing. So let's look at some of these social ills that we're going to be facing in the last days to see if we really are in the last days. One, we should be seeing drugs on a worldwide scale. In Revelation 18 verse 23 it says, the light of a lamp shall not shine in Babylon any more, and the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall not be heard in you any more. For your merchants, in other words, the businessmen who made money off of you, were the great men of the earth, for by your sorcery all the nations were deceived. Sorcery. Do you know what that word is in the Greek? Pharmakia. There's three words, but pharmakia is the primary word. Pharmakia, pharmakouos, pharmakon. Oh, they're all the same cognate. So pharmacy, that's where our word comes from. Pharmacy. In other words, pharmakia, or as it's translated in the New King James, sorcery, those are identifying characteristics of the last days. And it'll be global, and it will be overwhelming. And people will be making billions and billions of dollars in trade selling drugs to people who become victims. Through it all, the nations are going to be deceived or caused to wander. The explosion of drug abuse, from opioids to methamphetamines and all the derivatives, is destroying generations of people, young people primarily. It is a war that most of us consider lost. So we've got drugs on a global scale. If we have drugs on a global scale, that tells me we are in the last days. The second thing is violence on a worldwide scale. The reason that the times will be perilous is due to the type of people who dwell on earth during those times. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1, it talks, in the last days, perilous times will come. What is that word perilous? What's the Greek word? Well, the Greek word is used in Matthew chapter 8, verse 28. When he, Jesus, had come to the other side, to the country of the Gergesenes, there met him two demon-possessed men, coming out of the tombs, exceedingly fierce, so that no one could pass that way. That word exceedingly fierce is the very same word perilous. In the last days, we've got a time when violence is overwhelming, frightening, constant, and increasing in its violence and cruelty. And aren't we seeing that? We don't get terribly upset when there's a mass shooting and only half a dozen people are slaughtered, because it's happening so often. It's a tragedy when one person dies violently. But we're numb to that anymore. And that tells me that we're late into the end time. The implication is that the times will be filled with mindless violence and brutality. And aren't we seeing that now? And those who wish to live peaceably or godly will suffer greatly at the hands of a demonized society. Violence, killing, slaughter, cruelty. You add your own words, but that's the life that we're moving into. Then there's planetary danger. Turn to Matthew chapter 24, verses 3 through 8. Now, Jesus has gathered his disciples around, and they're really asking questions. When are you coming? When are you going to establish your kingdom? Because you haven't done it yet. And you don't look like you're making any effort to start your kingdom right now. You're talking more about crucifixions and stuff like that, which don't make any sense to us. So tell us. So anyway, verse 3 of Matthew 24. Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, that's just on the eastern edge of the city of Jerusalem in those days. Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And Jesus answered and said to them, take heed that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they will deceive many. So you'll have false Christs everywhere. Second, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Well, that's constant. That's constant. See that you are not troubled. You're going to read all this stuff in the newspaper. You're going to see it on the internet. You're going to see it on Fox News or CNN or anything else. Don't be troubled by it. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation. Literally, ethnic group will rise against ethnic group. We thought it was unique that in Rwanda, the Hutus and the Tutsis rose up and started slaughtering each other after living at peace with each other for years. But the Bible says in the last days, nation, ethnic group will rise against nation. and kingdom. Now we get to the countries or political entities, and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be famines obviously caused by warfare and drought, pestilences and earthquakes. The pestilences, they'll be caused by the warfare as well. Earthquakes, that's the word seismos. It translates as earthquakes or great oceanic storms. And Jesus said they'll be happening in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. So let's break that down just a touch. One, there'll be disease. We've got AIDS, hepatitis in at least 3 forms, A, B, and C. We have anthrax and smallpox, both of which have been weaponized by certain countries. We have Ebola, which is running rampant through Africa just now, in sub-Saharan Africa. We have hantavirus. We have MERS, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, which is a coronavirus. Not that you need to know that, but there you are. Through that, it is a freebie. But it's a coronavirus that a death rate of about 35%. And a lot of people who've been in Afghanistan and Syria and Iraq in our military have come down with this. And when it comes to diseases, I'm probably not even scratching the surface of what's out there. I didn't even bring up Lyme disease. And let's go to earthquakes. It says there will be great earthquakes in various places, and famines and pestilences, and there will be fearful signs and great signs from heaven. Jesus predicted that the increase of earthquakes would be one of the beginning signs of the end of the age. He had it nailed. It's not that earthquakes are a new phenomenon. They're not. But remember, Putzi, a woman in childbirth? Antioch, Syria, not far from the place where Jesus gave his quake prediction, they lost 250,000 people to a major earthquake in AD 526. Central China lost 830,000 in 1556. But a listing of recorded history's greatest quakes indicates that 57 of the 79 most lethal ones have occurred in the last, say 90 years. In fact, deaths from major earthquakes since 1900 total 1,283,000. Only 880,000 less than the total death toll from the previous 15 centuries. So, like a woman in childbirth, the earthquakes are ramping up in terms of the death rate and the intensity and the destructive force. If you want an idea of the trend, the number of people killed in earthquakes in the 70s and 80s, the 1970s and the 1980s, was 1,148% greater than the number killed in the 1950s and 1960s. Jesus specifically said that these end-time earthquakes would occur in various places, or in his words, from place to place. In geographical distribution, all but one of the 22 major earthquakes recorded prior to 1900 occurred in Eurasia. But the 57 biggies since the turn of the century have shaken up places as diverse as San Francisco, Tokyo, Guatemala, Algeria, China, Pakistan, Mexico, Italy, Chile, Iran, El Salvador, and the Soviet Union. And don't forget that the Greek word also includes tempests of wind and wave on the oceans. That would then include hurricanes Katrina and Ike and Harvey, and the tsunamis that devastated Malaysia in 2004 and Japan in 2011. Then there's famines, increasing shortage of usable water. The groundwork for the fulfillment of this prophecy has already been laid. And we are beginning to see how easily such a worldwide collapse could occur. In Amos 8:11, it says, "Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord God, that I will send a famine on the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of the Lord." Nothing's been truer than that statement by God back in the days of Amos. We who are the bride of Christ must consider the price we must be willing to pay for our accommodation of worldly values and pursuits. The option is to get serious about the days in which we live and realize there are spiritual battles everywhere. I hope that this might have sobered some of you up a bit. And if you would like to hear more, tune in next time, because we'll continue this. We'll deal with the people of the end times. What are they going to be like? And I'll also deal with the question that you may be asking, are we past the tipping point? Or is there some recovery? Could we have another great awakening like they had with Whitfield? If you like this video, click like down below. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to this channel and click on the bell so that you'll be notified of the next video coming out. Until then, God bless you. And remember, keep looking up for your redemption.